Should a Christian retaliate? Find out, would you, in the following video. So tonight we're going to answer these two basic questions. Should a Christian retaliate? And, well, we all know the answer to that, right? We're not supposed to retaliate. So we're going to bring it one step further. Why should a Christian not retaliate? So the biblical passage is in Matthew chapter 5. We're still in Matthew chapter 5. We're unpacking the 6 examples. Right now we're on number 5. The example number 5 begins with verse 38, ends in verse 42. So anybody feels like reading it for the group, we greatly appreciate it.
You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you.
We've read these verses many, many times before, or we've heard it read, taught, and preached. But these verses right here are very revealing about our own self, very revealing about what's on the inside of us. Notice how it begins right here in 38, verse 38. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, where did they have heard this before? Is this a commandment from God? Is this a law? Is this a decision? Is this a statement? You follow what I'm saying? That's how we begin. So you'll find that actually in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 21. You'll find it in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 21. If you would like to read it, it will help us to have a basis, right? So I always say when you interpret the Bible, you always have to interpret it in the context. And you're going to see why this one is a very good, excellent example of not to interpret the biblical verse out of the context, which is what the Pharisees did in this case. So Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 21, what does it say?
Thus you shall now not show pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot.
So notice right there, it's given in a negative form, right? Did you notice that, Josie?
Yeah, you shall not show pity.
You shall not show pity. Who is speaking?
Moses.
Moses was the mouthpiece, but it was actually God giving the commandment to the people through Moses, to the mouth of Moses. This is why Jesus said right here, you have heard it was said. So Jesus was quoting from that very verse, Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 21. In that case, in the original context of that verse, God was giving that commandment for public use. For public use. What the Pharisees did, they took that and they applied in a private setting. You see the difference right there? Let's process that commandment, right? Suppose I stole an apple out of you. Did you have the right to chop my hands because of it?
To chop your hands?
Yep.
I'd say
well,
no.
that's what the commandment said, right? The original commandment, God said to his people through Moses, do not. That's the key word, the word not right there, right? This is what I'm trying to help us to see right here, the mistake that the Pharisees did. They took a commandment God gave for public use and applied it in a private setting. Whether you're a Christian or not, if I steal an apple out of you, You have no rights to chop my hands off because my hand is more valuable than the apple. That commandment was given for public setting to limit the punishment, to limit the punishment. See, what we're going to learn from the commandments of God, they come in two forms, do's and don'ts. So in this case, it's a negative of a negative form. Let me stop right there, see if you get what I'm trying to tell you. It's a negative in a negative form, right?
So it's a double negative, so it's a positive.
Yeah, yes, yes. And I'm not playing with words because that's the way God gave his commandments sometimes. The idea with this double negative commandments is justification for the punishment that would in turn render the people not to do it again and again and again. It's putting a restriction, it's putting a limitation to the same crime to be committed by the same person again and again and again. So that's the public setting. Just imagine if you have a neighbor that comes to your house and robs you and steals you, and he does it again and again and again. If that commandment is not applied to that person, think about that. The fact that that commandment was given is to limit him from repeating that crime again and again and again. And in the process, the damage and the destruction is limited. That's in a public setting. But you cannot take something that God intends for a public setting and apply it in a private setting. Is that making sense? Josie?
So the Deuteronomy, this is the public setting.
Yes. This law was given by God to his people through Moses. If you read the whole chapter right there, it becomes clear to you. So what the Pharisees did, they took the one first, which in this case is verse 21 out of chapter 19, and then they forgot the rest of the verses. So they already took that verse out of the context. The context of the commandment, double negative commandment, is to be applied in a public setting. How many here know, even in a modern contemporary version of it, right? Can you apply a traffic law to your family?
Good luck.
You follow what I'm saying? The traffic law is designed for public use, right? Are you going to make your children stop 3 feet before the door? Let's say that you have one of these traffic lights in front of your house and you have a visitor, your children or your family members. Are you going to apply the same principle of the traffic law designed for public into your private use? If they so showed up in front of your door and the amber light is on, they're going to stand and wait till the amber light turns green? You follow what I'm saying? It's ridiculously unjustifiable to do that, right, Marianne?
So when you say commandment, is this one of the 10 commandments?
No,
Or,
this is not
okay,
one of the 10 commandments. So that's a good question on your part, right? So when the Jews use this word commandment or otherwise in some English Bible, law, right? The first question we have to ask ourselves is what law, what commandment are they talking about? This is not one of the 10 commandments. You heard me said in the past that the Pharisees, they had too much time in themselves and they turned the 10 commandments into 613. Here is an example how they did so. From a public setting, a commandment God intends for public use and public setting, they turn it into a private setting. And Jesus is going to give us 3 examples why this law is not applicable, but it's going to go beyond just the application of the law. He's challenging you and I to see inside of us. We're going to talk about that. But from the get-go, this is what we need to establish. This verse 38, in the Latin, you probably heard of it. You probably read this before. It's called lex talionis. Lex talionis. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You don't have to be a genius. If we just process what I just said right there, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Alluded in that law is limitation of punishment. You cannot an eye for a tooth for an arm. You follow what I'm saying? You see right there the wisdom of God to limit the punishment and at the same time to prevent criminal from committing the crime again and again and again. Because this is very important. When you take a public commandment or a commandment intended by God for public use and apply it in the private use, there's nothing good that can come out of it. Either way, you can take a commandment intended by God for private use and you apply it in public. It may not work the way that God designs it to be. So this verse right here, 38, we have to establish the intended meaning of this verse, right? And notice right here, Jesus is going to give a cultural example of why this commandment for public use cannot be applicable, should not be applied in a private setting. Verse 39, but I say to you, do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. So let me ask you this question. When you read that, what comes to your mind?
Trouble.
Trouble. Who's going to do that? That's the first thing that comes up to your mind. Who's going to be foolish enough to do that? Right?
You know, the flip side is, I think your first reaction would be to smack him back.
Now, you onto something there. Let's think for a moment right here. Notice what Jesus right here is saying. Whoever slaps you on your right cheek, is that not how we normally do that? Who here is left-handed? Is anybody here left-handed? No? Since all of us here are right-handed, when you slap somebody, because you are right-handed, 10 out of 10 times, you're going to use your right hand, you're going to slap that individual on which side of the cheek?
The right side.
No.
The left.
The left side.
You're gonna slap them on you, well, his left, but you're right.
Right, yes. Thank you, Josie. That's what I meant.
No, this is very important. The difference is very crucial in interpreting this verse. Watch this. I'm going to stand. Well, I'm sitting down. Just imagine I'm standing. Just imagine me raising my right hand and slap somebody. Which side of that person's cheek am I slapping?
The left.
The left.
Yes.
For me to slap that person's right cheek because I'm right-handed, what must I do with my right hand? Back slapping.
Back. Backhand.
Oh, yeah.
This is very important.
What are you teaching us?
Why is this important?
Good question. Great question. That's the $1 million question. Most teaching on these verses forgot to explain that. Why? This is a cultural, historical context coming in. This verse right here is like an idiomatic expression. You cannot interpret this verse literally. What Jesus is saying here, in using this cultural context, historical context, given the fact 9 out of 10 human beings are born right-handed, what he's alluding to in this verse here is an insult. When somebody slaps you back-handed, that's an insult. Why is this important? Jesus is trying to help us to see. If you are insulted, how do you normally respond or react to an insult?
Anger.
Yes, you're gonna get more angry. You're gonna get more determined to want to get even. Most of us here, if we're honest with ourselves, as we were growing up, we've taken so many of this right-handed slap to our left cheek. But if you look back into your life, and if you count honestly, sincerely, how many times somebody backhanded slapped you, it's countable, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it is in that moment when somebody backhand slaps you, there's something on the inside of you boiling all the more, isn't it? We have a saying in our country, adding insult into
Injury.
injury. Slapping somebody right-handed is injury. Slapping somebody with your back right hand is insult. What Jesus is trying to get our attention here, be careful. It is in moment when you're suffering an insult. If you are not careful in dealing that, you're going to develop this vengeful, vengeance-oriented desire. Why is this important? If you go back to the prior verses before we start unpacking the first four examples, remember Jesus said, I have come not to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. So what Jesus is telling you and I, teaching you and I in every one of these six examples, particularly this one, as in regard to insult, be careful how you deal with insult. Because if you don't deal with it correctly, you're going to have this raging, seething anger that turns into vengeance. Right? So we asked two questions at the beginning. Should a Christian retaliate? Where in the Bible it teaches you and I as Christians shouldn't retaliate?
All
Right
over.
here.
See, I always say, if somebody asks you a question like that, say I was a Muslim and I ask you, where in your Bible it says that you're not supposed to retaliate? We should be able to answer that. Why? Because if we answer it according to our words, according to our opinions, it's not going to persuade that person. So here's the answer. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. Let's go there. This is very important. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. It says right there specifically, explicitly, and succinctly.
You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord.
Thank you, Marianne. So you notice right there, in that verse, two things are mentioned, right? The first one, do not take vengeance. Do not take revenge. And then it's contrasted. That commandment, do not take revenge, is contrasted with what? At the end of that verse?
Love your neighbor.
Love your neighbor. Now we're getting to the core of these teachings. When you feel insulted, when you suffer an insult, don't let that seething, raging anger, the desire to take revenge, turn you into an evil person. That's how verse 39 begins. But I said to you, do not resist an evil person. When you give in to that insult, and you give in to that seething and raging seed of vengeance, you become an evil person. And according to Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, not only are we not to take revenge, but we are to return revenge with love. Right? Making sense so far? So far, so good. Now that we
Yep.
have established the theology, that's the theology. Theology number one, do not take revenge. Theology number two, In contrast to that, love your neighbor. Jesus is bringing that a couple notches up. Notice in verse 39, he specified evil person. If we cannot even love our family members, if we cannot even love our neighbors, how are we going to love an evil person? Am I right? And the reason he's saying we cannot love an evil person is because if we don't deal with insult correctly, you're going to let that seed, seething and raging seed of vengeance to consume you, to where you yourself are going to become an evil person. So he's inviting you and I to look inside into our heart. What is the motive and intent of us wanting to take revenge? In light of Leviticus 19:21, there should not be a trace of revenge in our heart. Then he's going to give us 3 examples. Verse 40. See if you get the wisdom of Jesus in giving these 3 examples on how not to allow insult to become a seed of seething and raging vengeance in our heart. Okay, I'm reading from NASB, by the way. Whatever version of translation you have may have a different wording, but see if you can catch some important words. 40. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. So what is the main word in that verse?
Sue.
Sue. So when you sue somebody, what is the context of suing somebody? Legality, right? Legality. Now, coming to verse 41, what's this? Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. What is the context there? It's not a legal issue, is it?
No.
It's serving somebody, right? Do you remember in the gospel, there is a brief story about a man from Cyrene. His name was Simon. He was forced by the Roman soldiers to carry the cross for Jesus. That's the cultural and historical context of this example right here. So Jesus is saying, if you were asked to serve, in this case, in this example, walk 1 mile for somebody like Simon of Cyrene. Jesus is saying, walk 2 miles. What is the idea? You are not supposed to serve begrudgingly. Notice right here the change of this example from a legal setting to a service setting. And it gets better in a good way. The last one, give to him who asks of you. Do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. So what is the context right there? Borrowing, right? That's the key word that stands out in that verse, borrowing, right? So notice what Jesus is trying to teach and to show you and I right here. It is not in our human nature to give away things that we own, things that belong to us. And he begins by showing us right here in verse 40, a shirt, a coat. All of us here have plenty of shirt, plenty of coats. If somebody sues you for your shirt, what is the proper response according to verse 40?
Give him your coat as well.
Give them your coat, right? Did not Paul, the great apostle, teach? Among us Christians, we shouldn't be suing one another in a courtroom. Now you see the consistency of theology between Jesus right here and the great apostle Paul. None of us who are Christian should be suing another Christian in a legal courtroom. The proper response is if somebody asks you for your shirt, you give them their coat. That's what it says right here. But notice when it comes to verse 41, what Jesus is saying, if you understand verse 41 in light of verse 40, if you cannot even not take another Christian to a court, how are you going to serve when you're being asked to serve? Is that making sense? Right? And then the last example right here, if I come to you and say, I'm in a bind financially, can I borrow some money from you? If we're not in the habits of giving up our coat, is a shirt or a coat important to you and I? Does it have that much of a value that we cannot let go? No, right? But if we can't even give away something as less valuable, like a shirt or a coat, and when somebody comes to us in verse 42, wants to borrow some money, how are we going to do that if we're not in the habit of giving up a shirt, Marianne?
Okay. Look, you brought this up, let's say they want to borrow money. Why wouldn't you do that? Because they need your coat or whatever. What if you have a Christian that comes to you time and time again to borrow money, let's say? What, it's like they're taking advantage of you.
Yes, that's a great question, right? The answer to that question is the first time they borrow from you, did they pay back?
Oh, okay.
That should be the standard. God gives us a mind to think. So I'm just using money as an example when it
I
comes to
know.
the 42, right? The word borrow right here, nothing in this verse tells me that Jesus was talking about money. But in our culture, in our Western culture, the hardest thing for somebody to give away is what? Money. So Jesus is saying, if you're not in the habit of giving your shirt or coat, how are you going to serve? And if you're not in the habit of serving, how are you going to share? Jesus is not asking us to give away in verse 42 our heart and money. He's simply asking you and I to share. Should somebody in need of money, which I use as an example, you follow what I'm saying? So the other side of these three examples to process them is this way. If you are so easily allowing the seething and raging seed of anger to take your heart for something as simple as somebody asking you for a shirt, a coat, to help you to go grocery shopping, for example, right? In verse 40, 41, right there, go an extra mile. We could interpret that in a modern contemporary version of it. Put it this way: Judy lives in Barberton, we live in Sheffield Lake. Judy has a need, her car broke down. So she called and said, hey, Paul and Anita, I know that you live an hour away. Can you please help me get this, because my car broke down? That's going an extra mile. You follow what I'm saying? But if we can't even do that, that's serving Judy, by the way. If we can't even do that, what happens if Judy has a financial situation and asks us if we could help her? On the other hand, if we are very quick to be angry, if we are very quick to want to take revenge, when an evil person, going back to verse 39, when an evil person slaps us backhanded, which was an insult, we're in trouble, Marianne.
I was just going to say that what this 42 says to me is if you can see someone that is truly in need of something you can provide, whether it's whatever, I think this is saying, as a Christian, you need to do this.
Yes.
Just like I know it's not hypothetical, not literal, but if you got a shirt, give them your coat also. If you're able to do something for someone, you need to go that extra mile.
Yes. Because if we're not in the habit of doing that, if that's not our lifestyle, when suddenly we find ourselves in an insult, somebody's backhand slaps us, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have the seething and raging seed of wanting to get even. And it's going to consume you to where you're going to do something you're going to regret. The bigger picture, what Jesus is saying is, look, I have come to fulfill all the laws, whether the Ten Commandments, whether the law coming out of Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, or Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 21. You don't have to do that, he said. Save yourself from suffering because you've fallen victim to that seething and raging seed of wanting to get even. That's the whole idea in this teaching. Why is that? Because according to the Pharisee, when they took that commandment for public use and applied it in a private use, what the Pharisees were teaching the people of God is, yes, you can get even. Jesus is saying, no, 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 no. Let me help you see the condition of your heart. What caused you to want to get even? You have no need to get even because all these laws that you cannot fulfill, I have fulfilled them for you. Marianne?
You know, I can't tell you how many times I've read these verses, and I definitely didn't get that out of it. But now that you have explained it, it makes perfect sense.
Yes, yes. The key, as I said before, is in this verse. Do not resist an evil person. Notice right here, the Son of God, in his example, identifying that individual as an evil person. He did that intentionally to help us see if we give in to that seething and raging seed of vengeance, we've already become an evil person. And if you are a Christian, and you give into the seething and raging seed of vengeance in your heart, you become an evil person. What does that do to your testimony of being a Christian when it comes to what Jesus did, especially coming to fulfill the laws? You're mocking his accomplishment. You're trampling on his blood, right? But most people, they don't include what it says right here, whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. We, Western mind, we process that by interpreting that literally. That's an idiomatic expression. Implied in the use of that idiomatic expression is insult. If you can't handle injury, you're not going to be able to handle insult. And an evil person will always add insult into injury. But we as a Christian, we're not even to think about vengeance. Just reflect on your life before you become a Christian and after you become a Christian. How so often we fell victim to this seething and raging vengeance in our heart. Am I right?
Yep.
Right, Judy?
Yep.
And if I can help us understand this word vengeance in a deeper way, we Western mind interpret this word vengeance in a negative way. The word vengeance itself has a negative connotation, doesn't it? Something evil, something that we shouldn't do, right? But suppose your neighbor bought a new car. God bless your neighbor with a new car. And you've been riding this ragged car for the last 20 years. You've been a faithful Christian. You've done all that you can to live a life pleasing to God. You know what can happen to you if you're not careful in processing that reality?
Charles.
You're going to get jealous. Jealousy is another way that you're going to develop this getting even. Am I right?
And I think too, honey, sometimes too, when we see the heathens, the heathens that are not really walking right and being, and it looks like they're prospering, and here we are doing everything right. Sometimes, honestly, that really has bothered me in a sense, like, goodness gracious,
It
here they
should.
are, they're living, sinful lives, greedy lives for themselves, and then you just that has happened to me.
Yeah,
I
it
just
should bother us. And I'm going to bring it home with what just happened recently, right? Everybody here knows what President Trump has gone through at the hand of the Biden administration, this two-tier justice system. When you see that, when you read that, when you hear about that, If you are honest with yourself, isn't it something on the inside of you boiling,
Yeah.
getting ready to just kind of burst out of you like a volcano? Guess what that is?
Yeah.
That's a seed, a seething and raging seed to want to see justice done.
Yes.
But if we're not careful, in processing that, we're gonna fall victim
Oh, yeah.
to
Yeah.
that vengeful seed.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, the man talk about this openings, Olympic opening ceremony that's so wicked and so evil, and many of them get angry. And I told them, be careful how you process that. Am I right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
See, Jesus is saying in all this example, we're on number 5. You're going to see a pattern right here. He's inviting and challenging you and I to look inside. What is our motive? What is our intent? In this particular case, he's basically saying, why? Why do you bother to suffer as a victim from your own seething and raging seed of wanting to get even? No need to do that, he said. Don't we still do that though? Is that not our human nature though? Right? See, it's stuff like this, it's easier said than done.
Takes practice, or it does,
Takes practice, takes discipline, takes accountability, right? I mean, can you imagine what goes through the mind and the heart of President Trump? For the last 8 years, they've been after him, one way or another. See, you and I are not going through what he's going through. There are a couple things we need to do. We need to thank God for sparing us from going through what he's going through. We need to pray for him all the more. But here's the most important part. Because you want justice to be served in his personal situation, be careful. You don't fall victim to this seething and raging seed of wanting to see justice done for him. What if that justice that you so desire to be served and to be done for him never happens? I'm just saying. I'm just challenging a thinking process. It may not happen, right? Then what? You're gonna get upset. You're gonna get caught up. You're gonna get consumed. You're gonna have sleepless night, and you yourself are gonna become evil person. Right?
It makes sense, but then think of it the other way too. They can become evil. And it would most likely happen when you think of what's happened in the past.
See, notice in verse 39. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. What does that mean?
I don't know.
Resist to me is like
Tell me.
Whose job is it?
push back.
Whose job is it to turn an evil person good?
God.
Is it our job?
No, it's God's.
Yes. What Jesus is saying right here is, look, you're different than they are. Don't play God, thinking and believing you're going to change them. God alone can change them. But God is going to use you to change them. How? Return evil with good. Love your enemies. When they persecute you, bless them.
That's really hard.
Yeah.
It's impossible, Judy. It's impossible. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. What we're facing in this community with the level of corruption that goes all the way back to the mayor, don't you think there's something on the inside of me boiling? Want to see justice served? Want to see the evil people held accountable? But I have to remind myself, I gotta be careful. If I don't process it correctly, I'm gonna be caught up and consumed in a desire to want to see justice served. What if justice is never served, never done? What am I gonna do? Get mad at God? Stop being a Bible teacher? I'm just being real to you guys. Right? Why? It's not my job to change these people. Yes, I have the right to confront them. I did. Did I change? Not yet. Should I lose sleep? No. how many sleepless nights all of us have gone through because of this raging and seething seed of wanting to see justice?
And I think a lot in a way, yeah, because I'm thinking if they're doing that to the president of the United States, who am I? You know what I mean? It could easily be done to us. And then I think that's why you and I are relating to what we're going through here. Nothing compared to what he's going through, but it's just the injustice we see here locally in our little community. You know, it's just like, and so many times I literally have to say, Lord, I give this to you. I can't handle it because my right mind, my heart can. It's heavy and right. It's restless night, or I find my stomach, knots from it, affecting me that way. And I have to say, no, Lord. I just give. I don't know why what's happening was gone, but I trust you, Lord. I trust you, and I have to say that to be able to.
This teaching is applicable in many settings. How many here in your working years had experience or find yourself in a predicament where for whatever reason there was that co-worker that always get under your skin? And you every day you went to work, you just wanna
More than that.
Oh,
yeah. Am I right?
Yeah.
Even in a church setting, folks. Even in a church setting, right? How many times you went to church on Sunday? You got up on the right side of the bed, you're happy-go-lucky, you're smiling and singing, you went into that church. Lo and behold, somebody that sat in front of you is 10 feet tall. Or the people behind you were talking too loud.
Yeah.
Right? Is this not relevant, folks?
oh yeah.
It doesn't get any more real than that. Right?
Yeah.
See, you notice, as I said before, in all these 6 examples, at the heart of the matter is the matter of the heart. What's in your heart? Notice right here, the last example is exactly what this number 5 example is leading us to. Return evil with good. That's a commandment. That's not a suggestion. That's not a choice. Can we do that? Do we do it all the time? If we're honest with ourselves, no. No. Is it possible? Yes. If it is not possible, God would have not had it written in the Bible. And Jesus exemplified it. Can you imagine Jesus hanging on the cross, betrayed by his own people, crucified by his own people to the hands of the Roman soldiers, mocked on the cross while he was dying by his own people? And of all of his own people that the devil used to mock him on the cross, did you remember? Somebody said to him, if you are the Son of God, come down from that cross. Imagine that. But he's saying to you and I tonight, don't give in to that seething and raging seed of wanting to take revenge. I've gone through it so that you don't have to go through it.
And think of the love that he had. He's suffering so bad that we can't even imagine the pain and
Yeah.
mental anguish he was going through up on that cross. And, what does he say? Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. I
Yeah.
mean, whoa. That's wow.
Yeah. Isaiah the prophet said, right? By the time Jesus went through his, what Mel Gibson called it, passion, nobody knew who he was. From the torture, from the bleeding, from all that they've done to him. Nobody knew who he was. When they look at him carrying that cross in front of them, not one realized there was Jesus of Nazareth. Not one identified him as the son of the carpenter because of what he's gone through. That his face, according to Isaiah, was not even recognizable. But we're going to make the little things a big deal. We're going to hold on to a shirt and a coat. We're not going to help somebody for grocery shopping need. We hold on to all that God blesses us so tightly. We need to be challenged. We do. Our thinking process needs to be challenged. For so long.
Definitely do that.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely makes
Yeah.
you think outside the box.
Yes.
Yes.
We need to. We need to. That's growth. That's expansion. That's maturity.
Say,
Right?
Joyce and I were talking, I don't know, this was a while ago, and we both were talking about how it's so hard to not take the Bible literally. And it is I know she has it's hard, I have, it's hard. And so to have you explain it, and then it's like an epiphany. Oh, why didn't I see that? It's pretty cool.
I don't
Yeah.
think anybody really sees it until you would hear what you have to say. I mean, I don't think our pastors see it or begin to look at it like you do.
Well, that's what happens when you have too much time to yourself, like I do. But you know what, though? I take great joy in helping people to see what's in there. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge. My hope and prayer is that when the day comes for you to get to the point where you begin to see beyond any shadow of doubt, whatever you've been told and taught about the Bible is completely, completely flawed. I hope and pray when you get to that point, you have the humility, you have the courage, you have the grace to say, thank you, Father. This is the problem with a lot of Christians. They're content. They're content with the superficiality, with the superficiality of the Bible. The Bible, as I said before, is like an onion. Layer after layer after layer. And when you get to the inside of that onion, did you notice something? There's only one vegetable, right? Is onion and vegetable? It's not a fruit, right?
No, it's a
Yeah.
vegetable.
Okay, so there's only one vegetable that when you peel it, it's going to cause you to cry.
Yeah.
Right? Think of God's wisdom right there. And notice, the deeper you peel the layers of the onion, the stinkier it smells. Am I right? You know what that onion is symbol of? You and I.
Mm.
Now that's going beyond literal right there. If you allow the truth in the Bible to peel that layer and layer and layer of walls that we have built up over all these years, to where you allow God to use his invisible, gigantic finger to poke at your heart. By the time that finger touches your heart, it's going to smell so stinky. But it is right there when you know beyond any shadow of doubt, God has done his work in you, then the next step, God is going to do his work through you for other people.
Amen. Yeah.
Nah, that's from the Holy Spirit right there. It's not even in my notes. See? Glory to God. I hope the preceding video has been a revelation to you regarding why a Christian should not retaliate. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode, and God bless.